Live Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed, a show about the ins and outs of family life. So your life isn't going exactly as planned? Well, you're not alone, and we're here to help out. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in free retirement home search and senior transition support.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, the incredible story of a man who had heart transplant surgery at the MUHC last summer. Well, we have him in studio. You don't want to miss the incredible story of Dennis Carranza, who will be up next.
I cannot wait to hear about it. I've been all week thinking about this one.
Such
sure.
a
Yeah,
very
it's gonna be
fun and
incredible.
heartwarming story.
Yeah.
Hey, Corey, you've got a workshop coming up, I think, next week.
I do. We offer, like I did a few months ago, Camp Aaron offers a free workshop for children ages 6 to 17 with their caregivers. So this one is Sunday coming up at 1 p.m. Between 1 and 2:30. It's entirely free, and it's at the Rideau Funeral Home. So anybody who wants more information, I'll put it on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook
On our
page.
Facebook page, yeah.
But please, let's help these families help themselves.
You're doing such good work, Corey, and necessary, and I've seen you in action. It's just wonderful.
I'll try. Meantime, while I'm doing that, Matt, you were away. How was your trip?
Yeah, I was away for a quick 5-day jaunt down south with my wife, Stephanie. We were very fortunate. We were able to see both our fathers, respective fathers, so we did the rounds in southern Florida. We had rain for part of it, but we were able to get a little bit of sun time. But I tell you, Corey, I keep forgetting. I haven't been to the States for a while. When we're just at the restaurants, the portions, Corey, the portions are so huge. It got to a point where Stephanie and I were looking at each other we wanted to go to lunch. We said, you know what? We're just going to Publix. You know, Publix is like Metro. And we went to the fruit stand and got some fruit and salads just to have something reasonable and not fried, you know. So, but we did have a good time. I got in late last night, uneventful, and back in studio, ready to go.
Oh, welcome back. Always love to have you here.
Yeah.
Second half of our show. I don't know how many people realize this, but proper eye care is absolutely crucial. And that's from young children all the way up to seniors. So because of that, we thought it would be very important to have in studio an optometrist. And we are very fortunate to have Dr. Samea. He's going to provide us with some helpful tips and advice. And that's coming up after the 4:30 news.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, Corey. Very much looking forward to that. And all right, let's get started. And did you know, Corey, February is Heart Month? Very timely. This is why we couldn't be more pleased to have someone in studio that was the recipient of a new heart. This past summer, you can't take the smile off of Dennis Carranza. He is here in studio to tell us all about it, and he's also an advocate for heart health and wellness. Dennis, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's fair to say that you definitely have had a life unrehearsed, haven't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, tell us your story. It is fascinating. Bring us back, Dennis, to when you first thought something was wrong.
For me, heart failure began about 7 years ago when I was 36 years old. I remember the year started with the worst flu I've ever had. And a month later after that, I was on a plane to Mexico with my wife, and it was on the plane ride where I felt like I was drowning. I even fell asleep for a second, but I woke up in panic because I couldn't breathe. And it was at that point where I had the assumption that something was wrong. Even at the resort, I found it difficult to swim underwater, difficult to take 1 or 2 steps without losing my breath. So then you fast forward, I'm in Montreal. I'm thinking it's because I'm overweight and I think it's asthma, when in fact it was heart failure. That's the moment where I actually had my first introduction with Dr. Nadia Giannetti, who thought it would be most in my benefit to actually have a defibrillator implanted. It was at that point where they found out my heart function was about 15%. So it actually got worse. 4 years after that, my heart function worsened to the point where I needed an LVAD implant. And I was suffering from triple organ failure going to that surgery. So it's been a whirlwind of emotions, for sure.
I can't imagine. That is really something to hear that. I mean, it takes my breath away. This is huge surgery. Yes, fair enough to say.
It's big.
It's big. So how does one even begin to prepare for that kind of surgery?
See, the thing is, I was already heavy to begin with. I was about 420 pounds. And ideally, to get a surgery, transplant, you need to have a BMI of under 31%. And I was off the charts at over 50%. I weighed about 420 pounds. And I remember having a heart-to-heart with my LVAD nurse, D. And she had mentioned to me, listen, Dennis, if you remain gaining weight at this level, you're not going to be alive in a year. And in case you need to have heart transplant surgery, you're not going to survive the transplant at this weight either. So she's like, we got to think of something to do. And it's at that point where she suggested I have a bariatric surgery while having an LVAD. And that hasn't been done in Canada. I'm actually the first patient to ever do that. It's because there's risks with it. Because you're on blood thinners, you have to wean off it in order for the surgery to be successful so you can, heal. But on the other hand, my team from the cardiac side were saying, listen, we can do it for a couple of days, but any more days, he's going to have a stroke because of the turbine that spins. If the blood isn't thin, you're going to have a problem there too. So sort of like catch-22, where I remember my surgeon doing the bariatric surgery said, the bleeding is not stopping. We've got to push the blood thinners a bit more. And then my other team was saying, listen, he's going to die the other way anyway. So at this point, I think it was at day 3.5, the bariatric surgeon said, okay, the bleeding stopped. But unfortunately, it was too late, and I had a brain hemorrhage. So I had a stroke, and I had to deal with all of that, not being able to see in one eye and all of the rehab. And so I've had my fair share.
No kidding. You're listening to Dennis Carranza here on Life Unrehearsed, and he's talking to us about his heart transplant, which was done at the MUHC just 7 months ago at the age of 43, right?
Correct. 42.
42.
Mm-hmm.
So you had this surgery, you brought your weight down a little bit, and you basically, we've had a couple donor segments. Now you're in the waiting game, right? Is that how it works?
At the time, I was in the waiting game.
And then what happens? You get a phone call, and tell us about it.
So typically, you're in the waiting game, and basically it goes by how long you've had your LVAD. The thing is, because mine was an emergency situation, I could have got a 97-year-old healthy heart, or it could have been a 27-year-old healthy heart. Luckily, it was a 27-year-old healthy heart that I got, but I really didn't have a choice because I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital because of the potential. It could have been like a stroke had I jumped or really got angry. So they wanted to just keep me at the hospital. And,
so you're at the hospital the whole time,
I was at the
just waiting, and then a 27-year-old heart becomes available.
Yeah, after almost 4 months of waiting.
What was it like when you got that phone call?
That phone call was amazing. I was actually in my room with my wife. This is on the D7 ward, room 15. It became my house because I was there for so long. And we also decorated so that it felt like home. But my LVAD nurse, D, came to talk to me, and for about 15 minutes, she was just talking small talk, saying, your room looks so nice. How do you feel? And then she ends up saying, Dennis, it's your turn. And I remember looking at D and saying, you could have started telling me I was having a transplant without this whole thing. But then eventually we hugged, we cried, and then she told me it's time to start fasting because if the heart is good, it's your turn. And sure enough, it was my turn. So that's that story.
Well, that is overwhelming when I think about that. I'm a big Grey's Anatomy fan.
Same here.
and I wonder how realistic is some of that. I don't know if you watch it.
I
that
do.
is in terms of the surgery that you had.
It's pretty insane. Sometimes I'm watching it and it has to do with heart transplant. And it's very similar in terms of the drugs that they're giving, in terms of like how even the way the actor's feeling. That's how I felt as well. It's kind of shocking to see. Like I didn't obviously get to see the surgery being done and my chest being opened. I would definitely want to see it one day, but it's kind of interesting that I had to go through that twice, 2 open heart surgeries, and first one was for the LVAD, second one was for the heart transplant. So.
Unbelievable. It's Dennis Carranza talking to us about his incredible heart transplant surgery, and it's not like it's over and done with, right, Dennis? And it's I'm sure it's a roller coaster of emotions. You've got your victories and setbacks.
That's right.
We're soon going to head out to traffic, but we're going to hear about one of the biggest setbacks that was almost fatal for Dennis.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking with heart transplant recipient Dennis Carranza. What an inspiring story we are hearing. It's quite overwhelming, actually. Before we went out to traffic, we were talking a little bit about the fact that there's a lot of victories, of course, to celebrate, and there, I am sure, are setbacks. You had spoken to us off air about one of the biggest setbacks that you experienced,
Absolutely.
and in fact, so much so that it was almost fatal. Can you
Yes.
share that one with us again?
For sure. It would have to be the reason why I was admitted this last time before transplant in April. I had an LVAD, a mechanical heart. And
So you mentioned that a couple times. So LVAD is a mechanical heart. Is that
it's
it?
basically a left ventricle assist device. So people who have weakened hearts, it helps to flow, like for the blood to flow and perfuse the rest of the organs. So the thing is, you really don't have a heartbeat anymore. It basically spins and it passes the blood through. And so the thing is with that, it runs with batteries. It's kind of heavy. That's why my time with it wasn't the best, because I always felt sick carrying it. It always felt like I was a construction worker or an electrician, and I had this giant bag with me, and you couldn't get it wet. So there was a lot of limitations with it. But I was actually admitted because the alarms kept going off. It was saying that I had low flows on the machine. Typically, you needed 2.6 liters per minute to perfuse your organs, and I was down to like 1.5, so it wasn't a really good place. And once it got down to 1.0, the alarms were just constant, and it was this high pitch, really, because it's an alarm to scare you, because it's trying to tell you need to seek some help. So I was already at the hospital. I was at 1.0, and it just kept ringing. And at that point, both my wife and myself couldn't sleep anymore. So we were just taking turns of manually muting it, while the other one would be able to sleep for about an hour, and then it would be my turn, then her turn. After about a week of doing that, we were exhausted, where my younger brother said, you know what, let me come in, and you guys can sleep, and I'll manually put the alarm off. Eventually, my flow got to about 0.6 liters per minute, and my surgeon, Dr. Renzo Cicceria, said, Dennis, I got to tell you this. If you get down to 0.5, I'm going to manually have to block the outflow valve, which means you're going to start beating on your native heart. And because you're only at 5% now, chances are you're not going to be conscious. You're going to be on a respirator machine. You're not going to be able to talk, and you're going to have to wait until we get a heart for you. And I remember at that point, I'm like, wow, I'm at 0.6. Like, this is going to happen. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a victim. I got some shoes and I started to walk, because I said, I'm going to manually increase my flow just by doing exercise. The thing is, walking for me felt like walking with a straw in your mouth. Like, I didn't get that much air. So it was difficult and it was painful, but at the same time, at least my mind wasn't in fear. I would rather be tired than fearful. And then surely my flow got up to 1.2, where the alarm stopped, and my wife and I started, were able to sleep. But then I got inspired about doing the walking, and I said, you know what, I'm going to start to just increase the walking. And I started a trend where even the nurses on staff were saying, listen, this guy's walking 10,000 steps per day. And they were all telling me, no, we're going to try and do it like you. And I inspired a lot of people. And then that 10,000 steps became 10 kilometers a day, where I was walking from 5 in the morning. I would just come back for the morning rounds to get my meds, to eat. But besides that, I was outside of my room walking till about 10 at night. Come back to my room, blisters on my feet. But I lost a lot of weight. I think that was also part of the reason why I was able to have the transplant. I lost about 60 pounds in 2 months just by walking.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's Dennis Carranza talking to us about his experience of getting a heart transplant, which wasn't long ago, 7 months ago, right, Dennis?
That's right.
You've mentioned several doctors. You've mentioned the incredible team at the MUHC where this surgery was performed. Tell us a little bit more about that team.
Absolutely. Well, to me, it's probably kind of biased, but they're second to none in my eyes. They became actually friends, because in the last few times I've been admitted in the hospital, I've probably spent about a year's time in hospital. And after a year, you see them like sometimes 12 hours a day. So you get to know most of them. And they really became my friends, and they were there for me when I was scared. But I really feel like D7 is my family now. They were also able to support me when I needed care. And the biggest part of that, too, was the volunteers that were there at the MUHC. Sometimes I'd be alone when my wife couldn't be there, and there'd be people just knocking on the door saying, do you want some company? Do you want to play cards? Do you want to read a book? And Friday would be tea time. So it's actually part of the reason why I'm an advocate now, giving back to the MUHC.
Well, so that's incredible. I'm awestruck by your strength. Now, having been through the experience, what can you tell people about how to prevent heart disease starting today?
I would definitely say have regular checkups. That would be extremely important. Also, to be careful with fat diets. The diets that worked for me were the Atkins, low carb, intermittent fasting, and carnivore diet. And I was able to do a melange of all four. But if you can't do that, I would say to everything in moderation really works as well. Another thing I learned was that having someone to talk to. On my team, Dr. Granick, Tony, and Julian were there every time I needed someone to talk to. So I would say have that kind of support. And the lastly is having a strong support system like family and friends who gave me strength when I needed it.
That's Dennis Carranza talking about his heart transplant surgery, also a big advocate for healthcare. And you brought up very, very important points in terms of, okay, try to stay in shape. It's what you're eating. Nutrition is a huge part of it. But you talked about the emotional and psychological support, which is just as much. You've got your wonderful wife with you in studio here today. Obviously, Josephine, a big supporter of you as well. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Wishing you continued good luck and success and health. How can people find out a little bit more about you?
I'm in the process of starting my own foundation, a nonprofit. But for the meantime, they can find me on Facebook. I have a love and support page for Dennis Carranza. They can definitely find me there.
So say that again. It's called?
It's called Love and Support for Dennis Carranza.
On Facebook
on
page.
Facebook, yes.
Well,
Very,
we
very good.
certainly love meeting you, and
was a
we're happy
pleasure.
to support you. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, guys.
Coming up on right after the news, learn about proper eye care and how you can prevent ocular diseases as we age with optometrist Dr. Dan Samaha. That's coming up right after the news.